Someone asks a friend what they're doing for their birthday this year. And the answer comes back simple and unhesitating. I'd rather just have a quiet day. Not, I don't have anyone to celebrate with. Not, I'm going through a hard time. Just a genuine preference for stillness over celebration, stated without apology or explanation. Most people don't quite know what to do with that answer. They'll push a little. Are you sure? We could keep it small. And the person smiles and says they're sure. They genuinely are. The assumption most people make is that something must be wrong. That this is a person who is lonely or sad or hiding something behind a calm surface. But that reading misses what's actually happening. Because the psychology of people who don't like celebrating birthdays points somewhere else entirely, somewhere more interesting and more considered than the assumptions usually allow. Let's start with what a birthday actually does to the mind. Psychologists who study how people relate to time have identified what they call temporal landmarks, specific dates and moments that function as psychological markers, prompting the brain to pause, assess, and compare. New Year's Day is one. Anniversaries are another. And birthdays are among the most powerful of all, because they're personal. They don't just mark the passage of time in general. They mark the passage of your time. Another year of your particular life, measured and named. Research shows that temporal landmarks like birthdays reliably trigger what psychologists call self-evaluation, a process of looking back at where you've been and forward at where you're going, and measuring the gap between the two. For most people, this happens whether they want it to or not. The birthday arrives, and the internal accounting begins automatically. For people with a naturally reflective turn of mind, that accounting is rarely light. It's not a casual glance at the scoreboard. It's a genuine reckoning with what they've done and left undone, with what they hoped for and what arrived instead, with the distance between who they are and who they intended to become. These are not comfortable questions. They don't get resolved neatly over cake and conversation at a dinner table surrounded by people trying to have a good time. And this is where the disconnect with celebration begins. A birthday party is, in many ways, a way of moving through the day without fully sitting with it. The noise and the people and the familiar ritual of it all create a kind of forward motion that prevents too much stillness. For most people, that's exactly the point. For people who can't easily shut off the deeper questions a birthday raises, it just feels like postponement dressed up as festivity. They're not avoiding the day. They're trying to actually be present in it. And a party, for them, makes that harder rather than easier. There's also something worth noting about how these people relate to external validation. Most birthday celebrations function, at least in part, as a public affirmation. People gather to say, "You matter, we're glad you're here." For people who already have a settled sense of their own worth and place in the world, that affirmation, while kind, isn't something they need gathered together on a single day. The quiet acknowledgement of a few people who genuinely know them means more than a room full of well-wishers going through the motions of celebration. Now let's talk about something that runs underneath all of this, something most people don't consciously name. But that shapes the experience of birthdays more than almost anything else. Psychologists use the term mortality salience to describe the awareness, conscious or not, of one's own finitude. The recognition that time is moving in one direction, that the years are accumulating rather than multiplying, and that at some point they will stop. This awareness lives in most people at a low level most of the time, surfacing during illness, or loss, or the kind of quiet that comes late at night when the distractions fall away. Birthdays reliably bring it forward. Not for everyone with the same intensity, but for certain people. The arrival of another year carries a weight that no amount of balloons quite addresses. These are people who feel time passing in a way that's concrete rather than abstract, not morbidly, and not with despair, but with a clarity that makes the ordinary passage of a calendar date feel genuinely significant in a way they can't easily set aside. Ernest Becker, whose work on human psychology and mortality remains deeply influential, argued that much of human behavior can be understood as an attempt to manage the anxiety that comes with being aware of one's own impermanence. Celebration, in this framework, can function as a way of asserting vitality. We're here. We're together. The year is marked. Life continues. For people who carry a higher baseline of existential awareness, That function doesn't quite work the way it's supposed to. The celebration doesn't dissolve the weight. It sits alongside it, at best, while everyone else pretends it isn't there. What these people often prefer instead is space. The chance to let the day be what it actually is, a marker, a pause. A moment to sit quietly with the fact of time and what they've done with it. Not to grieve it, not to dramatize it. Just to acknowledge it honestly, without the noise of performance surrounding it. That's not pessimism. That's a particular kind of honesty that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Here's the third piece, and in many ways the most quietly important one. People who don't feel the pull of birthday celebrations have often already found what the celebration is supposed to provide. Meaning, connection, a sense that their existence matters and is recognized. These things, for them, are not stored up through the year and released on a single annual occasion. They're woven into the texture of ordinary days, present in ways that don't require a special date to access. Psychologists who study well-being and long-term life satisfaction have found something genuinely counterintuitive. The people who report the deepest and most stable sense of meaning are rarely those who depend on large marked events for their sense of purpose. They're the ones who have learned to find genuine significance in what researchers call everyday moments, the ordinary interactions, the small rituals, the quiet pleasures of a life lived with real attention paid to it. A good conversation on an unremarkable Tuesday, the particular quality of morning light through a familiar window, the satisfaction of something done carefully and well. These things don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with candles or a crowd. But for people who have learned to notice them fully, they accumulate into something that a single annual celebration can't quite match or supplement. There's a meaningful psychological distinction here between people who need marked occasions to feel that life is worth celebrating, because outside of those occasions, the sense of meaning becomes harder to locate, and people for whom the meaning is already present in the daily fabric of things, which makes a special day feel less necessary rather than more. People who don't need birthdays to feel recognized aren't missing something. In many cases, they've already found what most people spend their whole lives arranging occasions to feel, just once briefly. So let's be honest about who these people are. They're not antisocial. They're not quietly sad. They're not people who secretly want a party and are just afraid to ask for one. They are people who think carefully about time, feel its passage with more precision than most, and have located their sense of meaning in places that don't require a calendar date to access. In a culture that tends to measure how much someone is loved by how elaborately their birthday is marked, that's a genuinely different way of moving through the world, not a lesser one. Maybe the people who don't need to celebrate are the ones who already have something worth more than a party. If that landed for you, leave a comment. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video.